Hey guys, welcome back. You probably know Specna Arms from their AEG line, ranging from the entry level to the very high end. Now they've entered the bolt action game. This is the Specna Arms S14 Edge. They have a few other models, but I decided to pick this one. Recently, Specna reached out to me and asked if I wanted to check one out. These just hit the US, so let's find out if they're going to be a game changer. Comes with quite a bit, so let's look at everything it comes with first. I will preface this portion by saying that the scope, the rings, and the bipod were things that I elected to install myself. They are not included with the airsoft gun. Comes with a rather long unjamming rod, and I call this an unjamming rod instead of a cleaning rod because there's no tip on either end to really, put a cloth through or anything like that. 3 different Allen keys for anything from assembly and disassembly to hop-up adjustment. A little bag of BBs, I believe these are 2s or 2.5s probably. A pretty basic sling. These are fairly prolific. I've seen them with $40 spring guns and I've seen them with fairly high-end guns. So if you want to use it, it's perfectly usable, but not the first one I would recommend. A speed loader for the magazines with the correct nozzle to quickly load them. Some fun warnings, advertisement, and a QR code for the instruction manual online. 2 metal magazines. These have some weight to them, so you probably not want to carry too many, and they hold about 20 rounds apiece. And lastly, a second spring. This came installed in the gun. This is the soft spring, and it gets you about 400 feet per second roughly. I've elected to install the heavy spring that came separate with it, and it shoots about 560 feet per second with a 2 with that spring. The back end here is rubberized. It grips the shoulder pretty well. Right in front of that, it kind of looks like there are plastic rings, almost spacers, that you might be able to take some screws out and adjust the length of pull to the rifle. Unfortunately, this is a single piece of plastic. I found that out the hard way by taking the screws out and checking it out, and you can't adjust the length of pull. It is what it is, unfortunately. Just in front of that, you have a rear monopod. I like using this for display more than I do actual gameplay. I'm not sure I'd really, sit out there and wait for that perfect shot in that one position. It's really helpful if you're target shooting with this. If you're gonna do that, awesome. Otherwise, I like it for display. You can pull it out pretty far. This is about the maximum length, and there's a button on the side. Push it and it is a spring retract. You do have an adjustable plastic cheek piece. It is a nice hard plastic, but there is no rubberization on it like the stock pad. The folding stock is a nice storage feature. Are you going to use it on the field? No, not really. But there is a button you can depress there and fold the stock, and it does actually lock into place. Let me raise the monopod up there so it doesn't come out whatsoever. And just to redeploy it, it's a simple matter of pulling it and swiveling it around. You will notice that there are several sling attachment points on the gun, so you've got your options. If you want to run it folded, you've got one at the middle here, right at the hinge. You've got one on either side on the back and the front as well. The trigger here is a nice feature. It's actually flat, and this is the first one of these to have a flat trigger on an L96 style rifle. Something I found rather neat, and the other L96s do it as well, but this one did it a little bit better. If you pull your bolt back, push it forward, there is a little red cocked indicator here at the very back. All of their L96s of this style have this feature, but Specna elected to paint it red, so it is blatantly obvious when your airsoft gun is hot. Speaking of hot, you do have a safety here. Little indicator, if the red dot is visible, you're off safe, and pulling it back, you are on safe. At the front of the gun is a bipod mount, and there are a couple different options here. There are aftermarket lugs you can buy with like 3 RIS rails at the front here. It does not come with that, but it does come with a mounting point just at the front here where you can easily mount a Harris style bipod. The gun does use a non-tapered barrel. Other guns, sometimes you get the tapered one. I like this straight, consistent barrel. It is also fluted a little bit, and you can see it is spiraled as well. It's a nice aesthetic feature. The magazine is located on the underside just at the front. It is a little bit forward of where the actual firearm magazine would be, so keep that in mind. These are spring loaded, so when you pop them in, they're in pretty tight. There's a latch on the front here. If you pull this toward you, the magazine will pop out because of the spring-loaded mechanism. There is a small grub screw just in front of the magazine release for your hop-up. Rotating it clockwise will increase your hop, and counterclockwise will decrease the hop. Something most probably won't notice is that just in front of the trigger, there's a small latch, actually a rather big and heavy latch. Until it's broken in pretty well, you'll probably need a flathead screwdriver to pull it or push it down. Once pushed down, you can actually withdraw your bolt and swap out a spring or a part or anything like that you need to. You can actually have several bolts on hand to swap out different powers on the field or at the staging area probably if you need to. Notice I did remove the cheek piece here. It's a little easier to do that, or you can just fold the stock, either way. To reinstall this, it's rather simple. Return it back to its position. You do need to pull the trigger so that you can defeat the piston sear there. But it's really simple to get back in. Take your flathead and just push the bar back up. The internals of the Specna S14. I'll tell you, I've taken apart dozens and dozens of similar models of this, and I still really love the internals. These are a little bit nicer than most of those you'll see out there. Similar models are things like UTG, Warrior 1, which is a rather old iteration of this similar design, and the Maruzen, which, if I'm not mistaken, this is based off of. The barrel is a 500mm 6.03 brass barrel. You will notice there are 4 foam spacers along here. These essentially hold the inner barrel inside of the outer barrel reasonably well. You can get aftermarket spacers that are hard plastic and they do a better job than these, but what I like to do is go super duper, I guess you could say makeshift or cheap. I like to get electrical tape and wrap it around here and do my own spacers. It ends up being a reasonably solid and simple way to create really hard and really accurate barrel spacers. Your hop up here is pretty simple. A grub screw here adjusts tension on this plastic arm, which pushes a nub onto your bucking. It is a somewhat proprietary bucking. There are a couple of aftermarket options out there, but it's not your typical VSR or AEG bucking. So if you want, you can get aftermarket chambers and use those sorts of buckings. The trigger box is a nice, thick, heavy metal, and the sears themselves are made of steel as well. You can see there's a little bit of wear on the piston sear there. Take that as you will. I put about 300 or 400 rounds through this gun, and it's running a moderately heavy spring on it. The cylinder comes with this nice steel cylinder head, and it's got a couple of ports here so you can easily get some needle nose pliers in there to wrench it off. It's not super tight down when you get it, but it does have a pretty thick O-ring in there and a fair amount of threading. It does not have any kind of damper or padding on the front of it. The piston is a nice steel piston, has a couple of polymer guides in there. This is kind of like buying an upgrade kit back in the day. It's actually really solid, has a pretty thick O-ring on there as well, and has a nice rubber damper on the front. This is the heavy spring it comes with, which I'll tell you is probably up there in the 160 range or so. It is a nice heavy spring. So if you really want to reach out as far as you can, that's a great way to do it out of the box. Nice steel spring guide, no bearings, so nothing can go wrong like that. If you want to put bearings on something like this, that's fine, but that's just one more place of problem that can arise. So a nice single piece steel spring guide is the way to go. Overall, the internals of this gun out of the box are really solid. They do a really nice job on this. The cylinder's nice and smooth, more so than other similar models I've seen out there. You essentially get a really nice upgrade kit out of the box and a new cylinder head. Something I do want to talk about is the power of the airsoft gun out of the box. I really like having a hefty spring in there. It's just fun. You get some awesome range out of it. You can use nice heavy BBs with it. But unfortunately, a lot of fields in my experience aren't going to allow that, at least here in the US. My local field, Nighthawk Airsoft, this shoots way too hot to use out there with the heavy spring. Shooting about 560 feet per second with a 2. I was clocking about 520 with a 2.5 and somewhere around that 420, 430 mark with a 0.4. That ends up being fairly dangerous and something I can't use at my local field, unfortunately. If you're using the softer spring, you're getting about 400 FPS with a 2, and that would probably qualify this airsoft gun as a field rifle, not a bolt action or sniper rifle at my local field. So I could use it at a fairly close range, but the power and the range just wouldn't be there. And so I kind of wish that there was an option for an intermediate spring, somewhere like that 450 to 500 FPS range. And I think that would make this a really solid airsoft gun, more so than it already is out of the box, and it would work for a lot more people. Still, Specna took a really solid design. This L96 design, the mechanism, the trigger and everything has been around since before I even started airsofting. So it's been in the world for a while. They put a number of upgrades in it. They put a 6.03 barrel. They put some better parts in the bolt, your steel cylinder head, your steel piston, and a nice spring guide without a bearing, so it's a little bit more durable. They put a number of good parts in there, and they also put a new and interesting flat face trigger in there. So they took an old design and I think they made it really nice and new and kind of revamped it in a lot of ways. My closing thoughts on the Specna Arms S14. I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. They did a really solid job on this gun. You get some internal upgrades, it shoots really nicely, and I think the whole point of a bolt-action airsoft gun is to get out past the normal AEG range, which is like 150 to 200 feet, give or take. This definitely does that. You can really reach out to that 200, 250, even 300 foot mark with the right ammunition and the right power. It's not very often I get to check out bolt-action airsoft guns, and it's even more rare that companies that make bolt-action airsoft guns send me them to review. So big thanks to Specna Arms for sending this out. This is a lot of fun to try out and review. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next review.